A daylight abduction, mistaken identity, unwilling captivation, itinerary unknown.
To some of our citizens, the nation's most abiding strength is and always shall be the ever-present touch of deity blessing the Estolian people. To others, the true strength is the power of love garnered by the exchange of souls. Few can continue to hate within when they have felt their soul keep, or be kept by, another soul. Gallagher Octavian Zakarian, Capitulo 76.
She was not watching where she was going, and a passing cyclist bumped into her. Stumbling, she would have fallen but for the quick thinking of someone else who grabbed her arm and held her upright. But, before she could properly thank him, he was pushing her into a limousine. Confused, she tried to take in her surroundings. By the time she recognized the man from the restaurant, the door had closed and the vehicle was in motion. She tried to figure out how to open the vehicle door, but motor vehicles were so new for her, she could not figure out how to escape.
"What do you want?"
She asked the man who had sent her money in the diner. She was proud of the way the words came out. She sounded haughty and superior, instead of how she felt, frightened and confused. He smiled at her, making her feel peculiar. With a more distinct accent than his assistant, he said,
"I wish to speak with you."
She looked out the window. They were moving away from her neighborhood and towards downtown.
"I saw you in the restaurant and was convinced you were without a doubt the most radiant, most beautiful woman in the world. As such, do you blame me for trying to encourage you to eat a meal with me?"
She snorted, saying,
"Most gentlemen ask a lady out. They do not just throw money at her and expect her to be flattered and consent to a date."
On the contrary, most women of my acquaintance find money a worthy enough incentive for accepting a date.
"I am not most women then, because your money does nothing for me."
He leaned forward and said something to the man with the scars who was driving the car. He pulled the vehicle to a halt and got out, leaving her alone with the suave stranger. That was when it finally occurred to her that she might have actually been abducted. After several long minutes, he said to her,
"I see now that money is insufficient incentive for a woman with your extraordinary assets."
"Let me out at once."
She demanded. Incredulous fury was starting to burgeon within her. The driver's door opened and the chauffeur slipped back inside the limousine, handing his employer a small box before smoothly re-entering traffic.
"Here."
He passed her the velvet-covered box.
"Is this more the thing that you expect to receive from the men friends you have?"
She opened the box and stared at the extravagant jewelry within. During her time in the United States, she had come to understand the relative value of certain things. Jewelry was one of those things. While nowhere near the value of her personal jewels, she knew the necklace in the box was most likely worth a considerable sum. Closing the box with a snap, she tossed it into his lap as if it was burning her hands.
"I do not want to have dinner with you or to accept money or jewels from you. I will not share my body with you. I demand that you let me out of this vehicle immediately."
His response was even more infuriating than his earlier presumptions.
"I am certain your attitude will change. But you must understand I'm not overly fond of the hard-to-get role."
She sighed, exaggeratedly.
"What must I say to get you to understand that I have no interest in you? I do not know who you are, nor do I care. If you do not let me out, I shall be forced to attract the attention of a police officer."
She looked at her phone, hoping to contact Nico. He would come to her rescue. Or Zeb. But her cell phone was not getting any reception. He looked at her thoughtfully for several minutes before saying,
"Perhaps this role, that of the hard-to-convince woman, is one of your specialities. I think I might like it after all."
He stopped speaking and nodded decisively as if he had come to some understanding within himself.
"I shall pay you double the amount I normally pay. Maxine will not learn from me how lucrative our transaction was for you. I shall enjoy exploring this role with you."
He looked like he had satisfactorily concluded some tricky business deal. Sitting back, he waited for her to happily jump at his offer. Except nothing he said made any sense. She sifted through his words and latched onto one thing.
Just who do you think I am?
He raised one dark, elegant eyebrow.
One of Maxine's girls. I told her I liked variety, that I wished to have a woman to be my companion for the next week who would be neither coarse nor too obviously experienced. I am flattered she would know me well enough to send you.
His eyes were warm as they traveled over her curves. Discussion about desire and physical relationships were commonplace in Estolia, but it was not typical to have a man discuss what sounded like prostitution. She could feel the heat of a blush staining her cheeks.
You think I am some sort of call girl? You are mistaken. I do not know anyone by the name of Maxine. Now, let me out.
She was proud of her ability to keep her voice even and calm. So far, he had given no sign that he intended to force himself on her, but she did not want to antagonize him. Deity would protect her, just as her aunt Catherine had been protected when she was kidnapped. Ria had to firmly suppress the fear that was eroding her fury. His eyes narrowed and he looked her up and down again, a perplexed frown wrinkling his brow. He said something to the driver and a second later was handed a phone. He spoke in an unfamiliar language before terminating the call.
It appears I owe you an apology. You are not the girl Maxine reserved for me,
he said. She smiled, relieved that he finally believed her.
Perhaps now you will stop and let me out?
He smiled too, but she was wary of the expression.
You intrigue me. I would still like to spend the next week in your company. As you are not working for Maxine, you will not need to share any of the commission with her.
I do not want to have anything to do with you. Are you unable to understand plain English? Did you not hear what I said?
Yes, I did in fact hear what you said to me. Your well-worded rejection was clear and concise,
he said.
But you apparently did not hear my words. I desire you. No matter what sort of price you have on your body, I assure you I can pay it. So, let us dispense with modesty and get this unpleasant business of money out of the way, so we can move on to finding pleasure with one another. I assure you, I am not a selfish lover.
He paused, studying her face, before he asked.
Tell me plainly, what price do you place upon your time? What motivates a woman as exquisite as you?
The car entered an exclusive parking garage.
If you asked me politely to go on a date with you, I might have said yes. If you want me to sleep with you, I do not think you could pay my price.
She wanted to shock him, make him listen to her.
Name it,
he said. His eyes were running over her generous curves.
The only man who will possess my body is the man who will marry me.
If he would not listen to protestations of disinterest, perhaps he would pay more attention to her if she brought up marriage. Her eyes met his, hoping he would see the sincerity in her gaze.
If I yield up my body to any man who does not become my husband, I would ruin irrevocably the ability to marry. No amount of money is worth a lifetime of loneliness and the destruction of my dreams.
When the car came to a halt, he asked,
Will you at least agree to continue this fascinating conversation with me in the comfort of my apartment?
Not even sure what possessed her to do so, she agreed.
Estolian princess in an alien place, in her headstrong desire to get her education, her giddy justification, a daylight abduction, mistaken identity.